Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Harry Lennix is an actor. He sat down with me on the Upper East Side of Manhattan to talk about the work.
You landed the role, you have the script. What's the first thing you do?
I think a thorough reading of the script is important. That is, to read the script while answering every question that the script might present. Does the script give you enough information about the character you're playing? Do you know what the situation is? Is it clear? What role does the character I am playing have within the film and the process as a whole, within its larger diegetical purpose? I try to reduce it. I generally work, though, outside in. That is, that I like to have a firm intellectual understanding of who the character is within the framework of the larger narrative. And so in a case of like historical dramas, for example, Shakespeare, Aaron the Moor, playing Aaron the Moor in the Julie Taymor film. In that case, I had already played the part. I had done it on stage. It was not historical per se, but there was a historical time in which it was set. And I wanted to know about that. What were the Goths? Who were they within the realm of this Roman revenge tragedy? And what were their relationships to Moors or other prisoners of war that might come in? How were they treated? What were the triumphs and all of those things like? So I like to know intellectually who this character is within a context. Once I know who that is, then I have to figure out what is that character like. Is he rich or is he poor? Is he black or white or non-determined? Is that important at all to his actions within the thing? Is he young or old? Or how long do we have with this character? What outside considerations do I have to take? Will I have to put on makeup? Will I have to grow a beard? Should I use some other affectations, props, disguise, costume, how the character moves? Monty Clift, for example, always wanted to figure out how the character walked first. And I remember studying walking quite a bit, how a character moves through a scene. People like John Wayne, even though he's not considered an accomplished actor, it's quite untrue. He's a masterful film actor. He knows how to use his size and his grace, masterfully, and that's important when you're an actor like me. I can't pretend to be small per se, although sometimes there are tricks that people use. But I'm a big guy. I have to, and tall and lanky, rangy, and so I have to figure out: is the character awkward? Is the character smooth? Is the character intelligent? Is the character stupid? And frequently, is something even as basic as the character left-handed or right-handed? Mm-hmm. And how would that, so those are the physical things that I like to work on before I start getting into what I call the mortar. So I like to build the bricks of the building first, and then I'll, if as needed, you can put in the mortar. But I think that my theory about acting is that acting should always be outside in. I think that Marlon Brando once said that some characters are closer to you than others, but they're all difficult. You always have to do some growth. Either that's internal growth, delving to some sort of psychological, emotional, spiritual truth that would otherwise not be accessed, except for that you have a means to do it with this character. But I'm not what is called a method actor. I just did my air quotes there, but there are many methods, and I think that the most important method is what speaks most organically to the actor, for me, to know academically, nuts and bolts, what are the physical, and even in so to speak, the software requirements of the character. How does the character process information? What does the character do when they're angry? Do they, are they like me? Are they different than I am? And then if that is so, if it's different, or they are different, who can I base that on? So I generally go to my codex of personalities that I know when I'm basing it on a person. But when it's pure invention and I can do with it as I like, I try to play some general sort of principle. And I go back to traditional methodologies like, even something as simple as Del Sarte, finding physical, what Julie Taymor calls it's really a psychological gesture, but she calls it an ideograph. The one motion, the one pose, the one gesture that encapsulates the character that you're playing. So to try to reduce it, like Picasso reduced his line drawings of bulls and so forth, I try to be reductive in that sense. Charlie Lawton once talking about Clark Gable, who he said was his favorite movie actor, he said he paints with a very fine brush, whereas Lawton thought he used a very broad brush with big broad strokes. Well, I admire the big broad strokes because I think it's definitive, it's elegant, it is like a haiku. It captures things without it seeming to be complicated and comprehensive. It is.
It also seems like, the way you're saying it, when something is reductive like that to an image, it's easy to go back to that when you're in trouble a little bit. Is that right?
That's right. It's a ground, so to speak. It is a principle. It is a foundation of the character, and to some extent of the whole ethos, as it were, the psychology, if you will, the spirit of the movie. If you know what your role is, in the most simple. If you are the protagonist, if you're the antagonist, if you are the guy with the suitcase who brings in the red herring, if you are the messenger, if you are, in Shakespeare, we say that every character who enters Shakespeare, it's a life and death situation. Every time you come on stage in Shakespeare, it's life or death. It's probably true of all drama, really, at least of all good, relevant drama, is that it is always urgent. And we reduce entire universes of lives into a 2-hour span of time with an intermission in the theater or on a movie screen. You don't want to see them, shaving in the morning per se, unless that. But you know what I mean. We're agreeing that this is the essential element or elements to the story.
Yeah.
And what is the element that I'm bringing to it to make it happen? That's A. So whenever you get lost and because you see actors in otherwise forgettable films who are acting their asses off and all of this, it might save the movie. Or sometimes you'll see an actor who can ruin the movie because it becomes about them. Now, an actor's is supposed to always be about them. I think that's, at least in the theater, we call the actor the first artist of the theater. Without the actor, there's no play. But that's not necessarily the truth in film. It is the objective of the director, perhaps the producer, to decide how that actor can be used within a broader, cohesive framework. And so but I think most actors tend to act like Russell Westbrook plays basketball. That is, he says when people say he's trying to inflate his stats of rebounds and all this, that he deliberately undermines his own teammates so he can get the ball. He says, I'm trying to get the ball every chance I get. There's nothing wrong with wanting to have the ball and getting it, going for it. Everybody should be doing it. I'm going to get it if I can get it. Yeah. The actor should be, that's their attitude writ large, and it should be. But I think that sometimes a more seasoned actor, an actor who finds himself or herself in the position of a character actor, is a facilitator for a broader narrative, and I see myself in that school. This is as old as acting. This debate between the star actor, who's a huge personality like Sarah Bernhardt, as opposed to the Eleanor Duse school, who is playing a character within a broader context, who is bringing a craft that is more than their personality, a kind of willingness to subjugate one's own ego and personality for a more noble purpose. That is to say, if it can be as reductive as this, to serve the play. But we're all making that balance. Even the most selfless actor is wondering how he or she could serve their own career and their legend, and to get out of the process what they want. That's the delicate balance. But I side more with the character acting school.
Let's talk about what got you here. You have a connection to classical work. You have this respect for this work. Where did this come from? Like, where did the acting bug catch you?
I can almost certainly go back to the first time I was aware that there was this thing called acting. That is, that people could play parts that were not themselves within the context of some sort of story being told. When my brother, I saw him when I was in 2nd grade, he was in 8th grade. We were at the same school, and there was a performance of something, some skit. And I remember my brother played like a street hustler on the corner, and somebody comes up and they hit him on the head with what appeared to be a baton or a stick or something. And I was sort of vaguely familiar with these kinds of weapons being used in the hood. I grew up in the hood. And I thought my brother was hurt. And, you know, I was in shock. I didn't do anything. I didn't scream out or anything. I was vaguely aware that everybody else was okay with it. But I was stunned that he could fall that hard and, you know, not have been injured. And then I saw him a few minutes after that little skit, and he was perfectly fine. He said, "No, man, that was just, you know, we were just play acting," or whatever he said. And I was fascinated by it. And then in 6th and 7th grade, we would do these spring little musical things at the school. And I would be called on, among other children, to recite lines or sing a song and to perform. And so I sort of had an interesting personality as a kid, and I did well at those things. And in 8th grade, I played Thomas Edison in a thing called The Electric Sunshine Man. And I became aware that I had an ability for it, for learning the lines and for retaining the lines and to trying to be entertaining, or at least to be being fluid on stage, not looking like it was on purpose. And so that became my first introduction. Then I forgot about acting for a couple of years and went to the seminary and thought seriously about that. But at the seminary I learned this, our motto at the seminary was ora et labora, which is Saint Benedict, who says to work and prayer and labor. And that was always our thing. I worked hard all my life. You know, I had a job since I was 10 years old. And so, you know, my sister was very studious, and she was the youngest in age to me, and I remember her poring over books, and my mother reading books and working crossword puzzles and watching what she called the creature features on Saturday, but not really being very interested in it. But I remember the method, the trappings, the tools that I use now in terms of research and study and mimicking at that age. You know, we were all just boys trying to figure out if we were going to be priests or not. And then a funny thing happened. I saw these pretty girls coming up to audition for a play at the seminary, and I thought, yeah, why not? I got into play. And one snowy Saturday afternoon, at a rehearsal that couldn't happen because we didn't have enough people, we watched the film of the play that I was doing. The musical was Guys and Dolls. And I saw this guy, Marlon Brando, and Frank Sinatra, and I'd heard of, you know, them. I guess I'd heard their names. But then shortly after, my friend was reading The Godfather, and so I saw The Godfather. It was on television. And it was like a revelation that the same guy who was the Godfather was this guy who was playing Sky Masterson. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, that's really quite a difference. And then I started watching other actors who could do that kind of thing, like Laurence Olivier or Alec Guinness, who you couldn't recognize from one film role to another. And some of them he was playing multiple characters. That was like, I was fascinated that it was like a magic trick. Mm. And with the use of things like makeup and the way that you walked, or the rhythm of the speech that you adopted, or where you pitched your voice, these tiny variations, and some magic, like the use of the camera and the lighting and the makeup and the costume, that you could become an entirely different person. And so I wanted to know what that trick was. I think that great acting, at least, no, I won't say that. Great actors are magicians, and that they should never fall into the trap of thinking that they're becoming the character except for when that thing is rolling, the camera's rolling, or the audience is climbing. But even then, they should be firmly in control of what they're doing. It should be as the British school used to say, Ellen Terry and those people used to say, you should be able to recite your laundry list in your head when you're standing and delivering. It's academic, it's mathematical. Now having said that, there are those moments when you get taken over by the spirits where you're channeling. Mm-hmm. But that comes from the free-flowing spirit that comes from the physical command. The German philosophers, Kant, for example, and Schiller. Friedrich von Schiller talked about a Spieltrieb, which was that there was that in between Formtrieb, which he refers to as rigor and study and discipline, and Sinntrieb, which he refers to as absolute wild abandon instinct, your untamed desires, your id, that there was what he called Spieltrieb, which is the realm of joy, which is a combination of both of those things. So after you've rigorously attained this, and after you let your imagination run wild thereafter, or before, or during, or whatever, but once you've got these two things, it creates a third realm, or a drive. And I think that's what I would like to explore more as I've come to understand it.
The journey you would have went down if you stayed in the seminary and this journey you're on now, is there any connection to those two? Do you find a spiritual relationship in acting?
Yes, I think that most of the acting that I've done, however, has been secular in scope and in nature. The most meaningful has always in some way been about ethos, about spirit. And, for example, people ask me frequently what my favorite role I've ever played is, and it's different. In movies, it's one thing. In theater, it's a different thing. And I'd say in theater, it's The Great Gatsby. And I think that Jay Gatsby is entirely spiritual. He is the representation of the American ethos. He is any means necessary. He is rugged, what do they call it? Rugged individualism and determination and manifest destiny and all of that, and personified. That's spiritual. I think that when I played Levy in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, he actually curses out God. And he actually says, God can kiss my ass, and he does everything in his power to stab God with a knife. And this epic rant that August Wilson wrote. People will walk out of the theater, but having as a Christian or a Muslim or whatever I was at the time, that's deep. How do you play this? How do you say this to God? Do you really feel that? Is that biblically sound? Is there precedent for that sort of thing? Can you, as a character, play God or play this character who says this about God? And I struggled with that. Not a whole lot, but I thought about it. And you realize that, in the book of Job, Job's friend says him, curse God and die, and that this character who's saying that actually does that. But what if I had to play Job or the person who advised Job of that? That's in the Bible too. There's nothing in dramatic literature that is not in the Bible, nothing. And if we're really going to represent the human experience, then we have to be willing, particularly as a dramatic perpetrator, as it were, then you have to be willing to engage it within the context of something that is not sacrilegious in a way. How would that, for example, when they did The Exorcist, one of my favorite movies, William Friedkin did this. Remember the Catholic magazine, the weekly Catholic thing, I can't remember the name of it, but it's Condemned. You were not, if you were Catholic in good standing, you couldn't go and see that movie. But I found it a deeply religious movie and experience. And so I've always taken the caution that religion is a personal thing, as given to us in the Constitution, something secular as the Constitution even, although it refers to God, that everything of value has a spiritual element. And so I'm happy to, I think it's an obligation to wrestle with these ideas as an actor, as a man, as a quasi scholar in certain areas. But I certainly don't circumscribe my craft to do some as a form of religious duty. I wouldn't do that.
I'm glad I'm in the minority about what I'm about to say, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to put it like this, but I do not like The Blacklist. It's something about this kind of fast-moving crime show that really bothers me, and it's a hit show, so I could say that to you.
Yeah.
You know, but that's all to say, there is something tremendously hard that I don't think people realize in this kind of show for the actor. And you are the epitome of doing good work with what I consider to be very hard material. Most of your character's text is expositional stuff. You're asking a question, you're gathering information, and then you're giving an order. They cut to you so much. They cut to your face so much. And I kept looking for a time when I saw exasperation on your face as an actor, from this. And there never ever was, that I can see.
Very perceptive. Very perceptive, right.
It's hard. I don't think people realize how hard it is.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about what I'm saying and how you approach this and able to embody it in the work and bring it to life, so that, you're one of the reasons why this is a successful thing, right. I believe. Right.
Well, thank you. And that's, as I said, that's extremely perceptive of you. A lot of people wouldn't see that. They just are listening to the mathematics being done. And so I think of it like that. At some point, I'm amazed every year, for example, that my accountants take all of the gobbledygook from all of the 12 cents that I made from the time I was in Iowa 20 years ago, and they take my wife's income and mine and expenses, and they put a very neatly prepared document together.
Right.
Every year.
Right.
I think of my work on the Blacklist or any other procedural type show or television in general, and in some movies as the long division. That is, at a certain point, you put in these operations, plus, minus, divide, multiply, and you synthesize it, and out comes a result. And so I think that my job is to synthesize a lot of information quickly, because I'm there to receive it. I'm the receiver, as it were, like in a stereo system. And then from there, I could split out and delegate, what goes in, and that becomes the substance of the drama, of the fun stuff, so to speak. But the stuff that I am allowed to do most of the time is the unfun stuff. But that's what separates the wheat from the chaff.
Yes.
And I think that it is, when Walter Payton in the off season was, running up hills, and then when you see the game, he's running through defenders. I see that my job is the grunt work, the sort of intellectual, pure data, almost perfunctory, and then to breathe into that a human element is just really an awareness that this information in this fast-moving world, there are probably people who can do that. I've seen it. I've seen directors in movies, for example, who are taking all kinds of information from 5 department heads. Right. At the same time, well, look, there's some person's come, the producer or the directors, I've seen them distill it and to make it into a symphony, all of this chaos around them. And so I see that as my job, to take data, chaos, and to compartmentalize it for the actors. So basically, I'm throwing up layups. I'm like a point guard.
Right.
And so I consider myself, in basketball terminology, I'm a point guard, the one position, and I'm basically the center of gravity.
Yeah.
So that Reddington can go out all the way out to the other end of the universe, but then he will still have to pivot around this black hole,
Yeah.
and I'm the black hole.
Yeah.
And so I like having to distill, and that's a challenge because it's not fun. As you say, it's hard work, but it forced me to become a better listener as an actor. Mm-hmm. It forced me to activate that aspect. I knew that, I did a role on Broadway, August Wilson's last play, Radio Golf, mm-hmm. where the same was true. 4 satellites spinning around this character who has to listen. So how do you listen actively without, squinting your eyes all the time, or without, tilting your head and leaning in? What do you think about? Or what do you appear to be thinking about? Mm-hmm. And what can you actually do to not distract from what is being listened to, but still be engaging as the receiver of that information? So you effectively, in my way of thinking is that it's like carbon dioxide to a tree. It just really has to stand there. Mm-hmm. And in so doing, it's representing multiple things. Really quite simple in terms of its appearance, but the question always becomes for an actor: what do you do? What are you playing against? So what is in the face of that storm, the calm that I am demonstrating, generally speaking, unless it's unless I am animated, it's the hairbreadth of existence and so forth. But to play, what is the opposite? What do I want to do? Mm-hmm. What would my instinct have me do? What are the colleagues and everybody looking around thinking I'm going to do? Mm-hmm. This is where, again, philosophy comes into play. The categorical imperative of Kant. In order for any decision to be made to be considered ethical, it must involve the choice of duty over desire. The categorical imperative. So what is the categorical imperative of this character who represents authority within the show? Mm-hmm. So in order for to be a robber, there has to be a cop. In order for there to be crime, there has to be punishment. That's the dance that makes America function. That is the dramatic core of life in America. Is cops and robbers, law and outlaw.
Right.
The outlaw is one of the most, celebrated figures in American iconography. It really is. It's almost a stock character, right? It is a stock character. So but in order for him to be effective, he needs an opposite that is equal to what he is. So in order for Reddington to be way out there and be capping people every 5 minutes of the show and so erudite and so, well-spoken, lovable rogue,
Right.
Cooper's not trying to be lovable. And he's certainly not a rogue. He's just representing this one thing in spite of the fact that just by this black man, who happens to be, since I'm playing him, is the quintessential outlaw at birth. And so here, the very dramatic, ontological, irreducible fact is there's a white criminal and a black figure of authority. And what is he, as an actor, is he bringing to bear, which is a considerable facility with language, and you can see how smart he is, fairly oozes intellect and so forth, as Spader, and class and a kind of Brahmin existence.
Yeah.
I'm going to be, I don't have to do anything but be neutral, as to reflect that back to him and then to reflect onto each. So I'm reflecting onto them, I'm speaking different. To me, even when I'm distilling all of that information and synthesizing it, I'm still reflecting onto the people what their action and what their duty is. And so I see myself really as just, I'm parrying people. I'm balancing the whole thing the entire time.
Yes.
And that's how I see my role.
About 4 years ago, there's some videos of you on different interviews, culminating in this quote of yours. Images in the media, all of them, are replete with depraved and despicable black people, and there are very few images of admirable, redeemable, dignified black people. 4 years later now, it seems like it's different. But you tell me.
I think that cosmetically it is different. Now you now got a bona fide black superhero in the movies, or two. And I think, and then some on television. You've got Black Lightning, which my Northwestern fellow alum Mara Brock-Akil is a showrunner for. So you got women empowered. That was the case even then. But there's still a gap, and so it's still, there's no sense of, and I believe maybe it was Fishburne or something that said something about equilibrium once to me. And I think that, so you've got these impossibly amazing black people, superheroes effectively, who might have some quibble about their character. For example, Black Panther, the black American guy was the villain in that. I have a problem with that. And Wakanda doesn't even exist, and yet you still got, insofar as it is an identifiable character in this, that's not a superhero, outside of the process by which he can attain certain powers, which are then later reversed. The black person, whose image I'm concerned with, the black American, is still in a dubious position. And I say that because even in that, he's greedy, he's immature, he's no regard for human life and so forth. And you've got nerds, and you've got super empowered black women, but still there's a paucity, there's the preponderance of the images are characters that writers, showrunners, society, entertainment are using kind of as guinea pigs. They experiment with these characters. That is Hollywood. There's always something not quite off. There's no, except for Blackish. And a couple of other things, I think but we still lack black people being in charge of actually controlling their own narrative. Insofar as we do, too frequently, and there are exceptions, and I'm glad for those. As I say, I enjoyed Black Panther, Blackish, the other things that I've seen, some of them are good. I like Black Lightning. But in terms of a dedicated show for the issues that are confronting black America, I haven't seen The Shy, for example, that Common put together. I think very little is done that offers solutions. You can't see any realistic looking family, a family that speaks to the everyday lives of black people, like, for example, in Good Times, not that all people were living in ghettos, but there were a number of shows at that time, or at least characters in shows. I remember Carter Country, for example, with Kenny Holliday on at the time, Sanford and Son. There were like normalized relationships with people that were dedicated to the black experience and sort of celebrated that without having to take on other causes as those things were being explored dramatically. So there's not enough realistic, solution-based, everyday, quotidian normalizing what the black American experience is. At least there's not enough of it. Wherever you see black people, they are in distress, generally speaking. They're fighting some other cause, like their sexuality or their location or some other, their nationality, some strife-driven thing. I want to make movies. It is my goal to have, even when those things are at issue, when distress, subjugation, which I think we've got a lot of, but just every day, even when those things, that there is a better method that we can bring to bear to examine those stories. It's always the same depressing, low production value or overly sleek unrealistic, surrealistic, hyper-realistic, feel-goody filler that is supposed to entertain black people, and our considerations aesthetically, technically, sociologically, economically, culturally, are not being engaged. And so, it'd be nice to have some movies that that reflect my experience. There have been some. Crooklyn, I thought, for example, that Spike Lee did. I think there are a lot of filmmakers out there doing great work. But what gets put on and celebrated is, generally speaking, something that fits within the easily digestible wheelhouse of what people already expect about black people when they see them. As they are servants, that they are rapists, that they abuse their women, that they're poor, that they're abject, that they have, that they're hopeless outside of the engagement of some white benefactor who's going to come along and save the day. These messages go out about us all the time, even today. It's hard to find a modern day movie about relatively successful middle-class black people. Where is it? Where is it? And so, when you see it on television, people grovel about it, but even then, it seems very sensationalized or in a very unrealistic kind of scenario. It's hard to find things that are on the level of, say, The Shape of Water this year. Just pure fantasy with these people, a monster, a sea monster or whatever, and a deaf girl. Something that engages the intellect, other than the very basest, most average engagement of people's intellect and expectation. And I don't want to do that. There's enough of it.
There's another video that they titled "Do It Your Black Self," and you were giving this young black female advice at an event where she was an actor and saying that she's a little bit disheartened with there being not enough parts.
Right.
And you said, do it your black self. And you basically did it your black self a couple years ago. I mean, around that same time, in a way.
Right.
Where you started Exponent Media Group and the Black Faith Entertainment, basically.
Right.
This fits in this whole thing. Like you're just like, no, I'm going to start making content now.
Yes, I don't. And again, I don't think any of this is new, Peter. I think that black people in Chicago have been doing theater for a very long time. There are groups like XBAG or Experimental Black Actors Group, and Kawumba Theater, and Houston. There's the Alley, and there's in Memphis, where I'm going tomorrow. There's the Hattie Lou Theater. So black people have been doing theater and making plays and writing plays for a very long time, perhaps not with the same amount of attention, but the Goodman Theater and the Steppenwolf Theater should not be relied on to provide actors opportunities to work or to write. It would be nice, since they're using tax dollars as a nonprofit to do so, and if they're going to get those tax dollars, and God damn it, we ought to get our fair representation therefrom. What Adam Powell called the Powell Amendment, that no law established to benefit one part of the demographic and did not benefit all of them, anything after that would be illegal, and that should be illegal here. That said, August Wilson argued for this point some time ago in The Ground on Which I Stand, a debate that he had with Robert Brustein, I believe, in the 90s, 97 perhaps. But the bottom line is that carping, whining, and moaning about somebody seeing your complete, utter value is useless. It's a waste of time. We need to develop, support theater, entertainment, content of our own. That's the only way that it could be considered authentic. And I especially believe that stuff which does not pander to, or does not need to appease a secret white hand in the offing that is actually controlling and manipulating the content that's going out there, which frequently happens. Frequently happens. We're still in the appeasement business in terms of we're subcontractors. Big white company gets a bunch of money to help out the poor, underserved or whatever. They throw a few bones over to Johnny and Sally Johnny and Sally make a mess of it, and it's being directed anyway, but they don't care because they could write that off. That happens a lot in this business. And so at some point we're going to really have to figure out not just how to make content, because I've done that, but I got to figure out how to get this content out and to provide an alternative source of entertainment to people who are sorely underserved. That is, I think that these black movies, such as they are, do very well, generally speaking, not all of them. But Tyler Perry's movies do very well, and Will Packer and a bunch of their movies do very well. You can count on them to do a certain amount of money. And I think that that would be true for other sources of entertainment that is well done or that are for that same core demographic. That there is, and in particular, there is a vacuum of black entertainment that deals with the spiritual lives of black people. And I think that everybody can benefit from saying it. We have been benefiting from 100 years of the spiritual lives of white people as a black people. And we, you know, The Shack, for example, which did well. I Can Hardly Imagine, War Room. All of these things are very well supported by black patrons. And whereas War Room had a couple of black protagonists in it, the other movies did not, and they still do well. So we know that there's an audience there. And I believe we can make it of a certain quality, of high. I want to do the Federico Fellini, Vittorio De Sica, Jean Cocteau level of stuff that engages people's aesthetic mind and eye. There are a lot of artistic people out there that are forced to feed on McDonald's from an entertainment, you know, from a kind of commensurate point of view. They're eating McDonald's and other fast food, tasty burger, no problem with it, but there is a better cut of hamburger out there with different flavors that cost the same amount of money and less carbs.
I want to come at this a different angle for a second now. There's a white screenwriter out there who's about to write this black character into his script, but he's kind of paralyzed at the idea of being accused of whitewashing. So he leans away from that, but then he may be paralyzed about the idea of being accused of getting blackness wrong. So he's just paralyzed. What do you have to say to him?
To write his script, and to not worry about it. If he or she believes that they have a character that wants to be, that for the purpose of telling their story, that either you cast an actor and the race is not important to the actor, but maybe you do it on purpose, then you should write the script, and the actor will tell you, or a friend, or another writer will say, well, you know, look, this is a very interesting character. However, maybe you would consider this, that, or the other thing. But do not stop yourself from a creative process because of fear, that you're afraid of either of those outcomes, that you're going to piss off a person, because they will tell you, certainly in this environment, or that you're getting it, and if you get it wrong, then maybe there's a way to get it right. But to not write it because you think you might get it wrong, no, you got to write it. If the script is right, it's going to be, you know, if the story pans out, there are all kinds of black people. There's no one type. There's no one right answer, ever. You know, I could find a black person who fit any demographic you want. I got black friends who are hockey fans and, you know, tech nerds and astrophysicists and hustlers and pimps and you name it. So I think that fear should never be, or timidity should never get in the way of any creative process.
Is there something that you're not being given a chance to do, acting-wise, that you not only can do, but you know you're good at, and you're not given enough chances to do?
I think I'm a pretty charming guy. You know, I would love to play, before it's there's no such thing as too old, but I'd love to play a couple romantic leads and heroic leads, do some Liam Neeson stuff, to do some Peter O'Toole stuff, to really utilize the training that I've had as an actor in classical works, not just in theater, but really to do it more on film. I've done a little bit of it, but I'd like to do more. I haven't played a whole lot of romantic leads. I've had a couple of love scenes, which were great, but that would be fun. I've got all kinds of ideas though for scripts. So as an actor, I would love to. A couple characters I want to play. I want to do Duke Ellington at one point. I'd love to play Bass Reeves, the great lawman, and in the Wild West out there, real guy. Want to do a Western. I'd love to play some sort of Gary Cooper, John Wayne, like mysterious Western guy. That would be cool. A couple of lead roles or so. I would be cool with that. And I gotta maybe create it for myself, but maybe not. Maybe not.
I want to see that.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Harry Lennix, thank you so much. Really appreciate this.
My pleasure, Peter. Thank you.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of IFP, the Independent Filmmaker Project.